So I love traveling, and there's nothing better than taking photos while you're traveling. It gives you a great record of where you've been, and it also gives you access to people, and it just sort of makes you feel better, doesn't it, when you're shooting out there? I'm Ira Block. I'm a Sony artisan. We got the logo up there. And I've been a National Geographic photographer for way too long. So I've been really lucky in that my job has opened me up to do great traveling, documenting places, cultures, and now especially changing cultures. There are a lot of places I go, right, where the cultures are changing, and it's a great time to document that. So because of this great job I have, I go to a lot of exotic locations, and I also work under extreme conditions at times. And for the average person, say you go on vacation somewhere and you want to take your travel photos, and you wake up in the morning and the weather sucks. And you go, all right, let's just sit at the bar and drink some margaritas. Well, no, there are other things you can do. You could go bowling. But really, what I'm going to talk about is how you can get out there today in the rain, although it's sunny now, it was raining this morning, and do some interesting travel photos. Now, some of these places I go to are extreme, but a lot of times, hey, the conditions look pretty good. Anyone know where we are now? Yes, Bagan, right? So when I'm shooting this kind of stuff, the conditions aren't extreme. This is part of a project in Cuba. A lot of you have been to Cuba, correct? Yeah. Everyone's gone. And when I'm shooting these pictures, what I'm doing is I'm looking for light, I'm looking for moments. So I'm not really working with the weather so much. Looking for moments and changes in light. It's really what makes interesting pictures. Shooting at night is great because it's much more dramatic than on a sunny day. At dusk, portraits of different cultures. This is a Hindu child getting his first haircut. He's not very happy, is he? Then I recall, I imagine when I got my first haircut, I wasn't too happy either. You had the barber's chairs that had the little fire engine. Doing photos like this at night with the Milky Way in Mongolia, where I'm going again Thursday. Anyone want to come with me? Just meet me at the airport. Again in Mongolia, these are the Western Mongolian Eagle Hunters. There's a great documentary called The Eagle Huntress about a young woman that was the first female to break into eagle hunting. Dramatic images in Peru, on the canals in Venice. Luang Prabang, a monk doing a selfie. Everyone's got the cell phone now, right? Back in Myanmar. This is from a story I did on olive oil for the magazine a number of years back. And again, these conditions aren't extreme, so I'm using light and moment to make interesting travel pictures. Lighting up a statue of the Buddha with a young child on it by candlelight. In the Caribbean, in horrible light actually, but the picture worked, middle of the day light. I would have been in real trouble, except his sunglasses saved my day there, right? Without those sunglasses, that yellow, I would have been not with a great image. So let's talk about extreme conditions. In the extreme conditions, you're in a situation where you're going to get more dramatic photos than on a sunny day. And The only issue is keeping your equipment working and keeping you working. And I learned about this really quickly. One of my first assignments for the National Geographic was going to the North Pole by dog sled with this gentleman. So I was about 25 years old then. That was a few years ago. And where did I grow up? Brooklyn, New York. Right? Not exactly an extreme place, although I remember we did have some snowstorms and got off school a number of times. So here I am, and the director of photography says I had done 1 or 2 assignments, and I think they just wanted to test me out to see if I really had it. And they said, we want you to document this fellow going to the North Pole by dog sled. And what am I going to say? No? I said, sure, when do we leave? And then I panicked. You know, what do you bring? How do you keep your camera working? This was back in the days of that 4-letter word, film. How do you keep all the stuff going? And then, more importantly, how do I keep myself going? So it was besides the photographic challenge, there was a lot about survival. Look at the terrain here. Everyone thinks, oh, ice is flat and, like on a pond where you go skating. No, sea ice, the ice comes together, it hits each other, forms these pressure ridges, and sometimes we had to break it down and then unload the sled to get it across and put the stuff back on the sled. So your work, this is about as extreme conditions as you can go, where the temperature is minus 40. And so minus 40, by the way, is the same in Celsius and Fahrenheit. It's where they cross. So it's cold. But coming from Brooklyn, I did know about dogs. So there I am as a young man trying to make nice to these dogs that survive in unbelievable conditions. So what do you need to do in the cold weather if you're shooting pictures? Let's talk about that. You need good gloves. Were any of you in here for the gentleman's lecture before? So he talked about these gloves. I'll look into them because I've got every kind of glove in the world, and nothing is perfect. So I've got gloves that are fingerless. So your fingers are here, but then when it's that cold, you get really cold. So what I sometimes can do is what I'll do is what the glove system he was talking about. I have these liner gloves, really lightweight gloves that you could use to change batteries and cards. And then I'll wear these kind of gloves over them. And with these gloves, there's enough dexterity on the fairly larger cameras to actually press buttons and operate them. But your hands still get cold. Sometimes over those gloves, I'll put this big mitten. So they come through. And then I've got gloves that have little patches on them, so if you're working with a touch screen, you could operate your cell phone, which, truthfully, the cell phone cameras in the cold weather, it's horrible. I mean, you got to get it. You're trying to move things around. It's really bad. Then I got these gloves just recently from a Kickstarter thing. Oops. And these have the touch pads on them, and my finger's in here. And they also fold back. So you need good gloves so your hands don't freeze up. Let's keep going. when we were getting ready to go, I think this dog got the wrong message. He thought he was riding the sled. No one told him he'd be actually pulling the sled. And then we had one incident on the trip. Our lead dog, our best dog, was a female, and we didn't know she was pregnant until she gave birth to these puppies. That's pretty extreme conditions. And also, we had the issue with the camp was attacked by a polar bear one night, and the polar bear ate all the dog food. And then the second time it came back, we figured it was going to eat all the dogs. So Naomi had to shoot him, and that created another extreme condition, paperwork. We were still in Canadian property, Canadian territory at that point, so we had to wait and fly in a local game guy because we shot a polar bear without the right conditions, without the right permits, so it was a big mess. But eventually we did make it to the North Pole, and it was a cover story in the magazine. So you can see the boots I'm wearing. That's the next thing. I didn't think you'd want me to bring boots in to start trying to put on, but again, keeping your feet warm is another thing you want to do in extreme cold conditions. And there are many different types of boots. The best type have a separate liner, so at night you could take that liner out and let it dry because your feet will get warm and your feet will actually start sweating. And that sweat in the cold weather can turn to ice, and then your feet get cold. So these liners are good to take out, let them dry overnight, or put a separate set of liners in. Now, what are we going to do about our cameras? The cameras work pretty well. It's the batteries that you have problems with. The batteries don't like all the cold. They start to die. It's just the nature of the batteries. So what I would tend to do now is use the battery in the camera and keep all the other batteries under my coat so they stay warm. So if this battery is out there, it'll, in minus, let's say minus 15 or 20 Fahrenheit, this battery's not going to last that long. Maybe it'll last 30 minutes of shooting. But if you take it out, let it warm up, it'll get power back. So what I would do is I would take the battery out, let it warm up, pull a warm battery out, put it in the camera. So you've got to change batteries, and that's when you're changing batteries, that's when you want to get to the thinner glove, because opening that little flip switch here, how easy is that in thick gloves? Not too easy. And opening the little flip switch to take the card out, I don't have a card in here. Guess I'm not taking pictures of you guys today. That's another difficulty. So in extreme conditions, now I'm talking about the North Pole, but even here in New York this winter, it was pretty snowy, and especially out in the suburban areas, New Jersey, Connecticut, right? Everyone here from New York are pretty close? Oh, a couple of you, right? Okay, so we had some bad weather. Even this young lady who was out trying to get some wedding photos taken, how happy is she in the snow? I'm sure there was a lot of complaints. So, one of the things that you need to do and be careful of is when you're shooting in the snow, sometimes your autofocus, if you're using autofocus, which most of us are, your autofocus will focus on some snowflakes and your people will go out. So you've got to be very careful with your autofocus. Now, Iceland is a little different situation than New York. You never know what's happening with the weather there. So, and the cameras How many of you have been out in the snow and shot, and then when you come inside, say, I'm cold, I'm coming inside, you bring your camera in, and you get condensation, right? What's the easiest thing to do? Before you come in, drop your camera in a plastic bag. Do I have a plastic bag? Oh, any plastic bag. Seal it up, and then when you bring it in, the condensation forms on the bag. Now, say you have a lot of equipment. We all want a lot of equipment. Do we all have it? But eventually, when you have a bag full of equipment, what I do is I take one of those big green garbage bags, I drop the whole bag with all my equipment in the bag, into the green garbage bag, get all the air out, tie it up and seal it, and it does the same thing. The condensation forms outside the bag. Then when you go out, you just take it out and your cameras are going to work fine. All right, when do I run into problems? When I'm shooting outside, and I also have to shoot inside, and that's happened to me. You're shooting stuff outside, then you come in, and you actually need to shoot. And you can't because your cameras are in this bag, and the minute you take it out, you're in trouble. That's when you make the camera companies happy. You have two sets of cameras. I have an indoor set and an outdoor set. So when I know I'm shooting in really cold weather and I'm going to be shooting inside and there's not, because the condensation for your camera to actually get down to the right temperature after you've been outside for a long time could take an hour, 2 hours. If it's really cold, it could take 3 hours. Could you guys please wait while let's sit around and have some hot chocolate while my cameras balance out? No, I bring a separate set of cameras that I leave inside. So in Iceland, I'm sure a lot of you have been to Iceland, right? Yeah, Iceland's a great place to take pictures. So you have the problem with snow. Cold nights, if you get a great aurora, which I was lucky enough to get on my last trip there, I think it was in March, and I've been there 5-6 times, I never get great auroras. They're there, but it's cloudy, and you're going, oh, it's behind the clouds somewhere, but I'm not going to get it. This trip in March, I got lucky. So the last thing you want to be doing is being out there in cold. So just in general, clothing-wise, you need to dress. I'm sure you're all aware of all the layers you need, and we talked about gloves and everything. Because if you're outside and you're not comfortable, it's, oh, can we go in now? I don't want to wait. I got 2 frames off. No, you want to be out there and work the situation and get a lot of frames on it. Another thing I was thinking of is, if you're shooting, is anyone here shoot in water? So when you're shooting in water, this image, the water's coming up, and you're on a tripod, slow shutter speed. Normally with a tripod, I always undo the first legs on the top because they're the thickest ones. You want to work with the thickest legs. The last thing you want are the skinny little guys in the bottom because it's more wobbly. But when you're in water, you want to start with the bottom legs so that all the twisting little, what are they? The knurls, whatever you call them, that open and close your legs, they're not down in the water, especially getting seawater in them. They're going to get corroded and the sea salt's going to cause problems. So if you use the little legs first, all the knurls are on top. So you can see there I'm shooting, laying on a nice warm blanket, and the legs are, well, here the legs are in the snow, and you can see some of the knurls are getting into the snow, but I started with the other legs first. Well, I was doing an archaeology story. I was photographing a 50 million year old fossil. And I decided to take it out in the snow and photograph it in the snow. And then I lit it up and see this nice little circle of light. It looked a lot better than shooting in a studio. This way I had the snow and everything on it, so it was good. Yeah, that was in South Brooklyn, 50 million years old part of South Brooklyn. So here we go. This is my assistant falling in another place. Crampons. Well, these aren't, the real climbing crampons are pretty severe. But just for walking on ice while you're shooting these, there's something called Yaktrax. That's one of the brands. They look like springs. Here's another brand. They just go right over your shoes. And they have little metal knurls in it, so you're not going to slip on the ice. And of course, when you slip on the ice, what you want to do is notice he's protecting his camera. He doesn't care if he gets hurt. He's saving the expensive camera. That's the wrong brand. He could let it break, right? These are called Ice Spike. Yeah, I got it's in Icelandic, so I guess it's going to be hard to find here. But I'm sure they make something like this here. And they're just good if you're shoveling your driveway. You don't have to do that, do you? But, it's good if you're walking around in an icy parking lot or shopping center. The other thing in extreme conditions are snowshoes. That's if you're really going out in some serious weather. But also, besides, your fingers getting cold, your feet getting cold, usually your legs, you wear a couple pair of long underwear, some heavy-duty pants. You could wear many layers on top, but what about your face? So for your face, I have all those wool caps, but it's really cold. Should I put this on? Oh, yeah. So you can wear one of these. Oh, there's a little mouth thing here. And we are in a bank, right? So let's see the cash. So these are good. Then I found this really lightweight one, which is what the racing car drivers wear. They're flame retardant, but they pack easier. So it's another good thing for your face. And then, of course, like every photographer, once you start buying equipment or gear or things, you get a little obsessive about it. So I was in an Army-Navy store. This is an old helmet liner from World War II. I'll put it on. And you could tighten it up. So it's right. Actually, I don't think this is it can't be from World War II because it's Velcro. So it must be from maybe Korea. Was it Velcro back then? No. In Vietnam, they wouldn't need this. But anyway, it is military issue. Yes. Anyway, so this is another little thing to keep you warm. Some people I know have put hand warmers on the back of their cameras, and that does keep the camera warm. The other thing, it's not so much with these cameras because you've got your plastic monitor on the back, but I remember in the film cameras when it was just a plain back, I put my nose up against it, pull the camera away, and rip skin off my nose because it was so cold the moisture would freeze onto the camera. So I used to put a piece of gaffer's tape on the back. So if you're ever working with some equipment and you're freezing to it, you can put a piece of tape on the back. What else do we showing? All right, so we looked at the horrible thing in cold weather. This is Niagara Falls frozen over. The horrible thing in cold weather is really working from a helicopter because if you think it's cold on the ground, it's gotten a lot colder once you get in the air. But it's worth it to get certain pictures that you need, certain looks. And then, of course, in extreme conditions, you run across extreme guys like this. And for this, I have no answer to what you could do. Just get out before it gets you. What's that? Sometimes you get the bear, and sometimes the bear gets you. What about, since this is also, besides being sponsored by Sony, this is also a Lindblad B&H thing, who I want to thank everyone for having me here. But I've been on a couple of those Lindblad trips, and they're great, and you go out in these Zodiacs, but it does get a little rough. So what do we do about rain and water? Oh, we've got solutions for that. One of the first things, look at all these bags I have, all these things. It's very cute. Anyone ever see these dry bags? They're great. So, they just open up. They're waterproof, and then you roll the top a couple of times, and it clips together, so anything in here is not going to get wet. So again, this is good for a camera, and what I've done with this is I put the camera in the bag. Let's see if this bag may be too small. Well, it'll work. Sort of like this. And then I'll maybe roll it once and clip it together. So it's not totally sealed, but it's pretty good. And then I could keep the camera around my neck. Too many straps. Here we go. Keep it around my neck, and then, when something happens, I could just pull the camera out of the bag. Now, when I have a lot of equipment, just like I mentioned with the bringing the big trash bag in, I've got a huge one of these. So I could put a camera bag inside of here, and so if you're out on a Zodiac, you've got the ability to keep your equipment dry, because you never know when a wave happens. This is a glacier calving, and you get a lot of waves and a lot of water hitting you, unlike the calm water that you can get in sometimes. So water, this is a geyser or geyser. What do you think? All right. And so rain and water, what do we do about here? This is just down the street here in New York. Times Square, the Yankee game. Then let's get to an exotic location. So what do you do in these kind of situations? Here this is me back here somewhere in some canyon system, but what do you do in these situations? So for rain, there are lots of options. So if you're shooting in the rain, there are many different brands of these kind of things. These camera covers. You could put goes like this. Your lens sticks out over here, and you could put your hands in through this, and the back is clear. It's pretty cumbersome, though. These kind of big, heavy-duty things work best if you're on a tripod. So if you're a sports photographer and you're on a monopod or tripod, these are pretty good. You set it up and you're on the tripod. But if you're moving around, these things do get a little funky, I find. And I've looked at many different types. So I've tried to simplify it. The most simple one I have is this. It's just sort of a plastic thing, big opening on one side, small opening for the lens on the other side. It's
you stick your camera through, you pull the string, it tightens up, and usually having the lens hood is really handy because and then your back is right here. It's very simple. Everyone see it? Simple, you keep the strap around your neck, and you could shoot. And I don't even know, I got this thing online. So, but if you look carefully, you could find them. This one is a little more complex, but same principle, just big opening in the back for the camera and a lens thing. You know, put the lens through here. Plastic bags, and I'll tell you the other thing I've done is shower caps at hotels. Borrow the shower cap at the hotel. That works pretty well. Let's see, we got that, we got this. Oh yeah, in the water with a heavy-duty light. Here, when I did this picture in a swamp, I'm wearing waders, he's wearing waders. And then we had a bunch of assistants looking out for this guy. But it's funny, one of the local assistants, you know, or somebody standing around watching our operation, because I had a big light in the waters. One of the guys looks down at me, we're down in the south, goes, "Those waders you're wearing snake-proof?" And I go, "Do they make snake-proof waders?" "Oh, yeah." I was worried about the big, you know, the big animals and not the little snakes that could show up. All right, what happens when it's really, really wet? Like this kind of wet. So what are you going to do? Well, they're underwater housings, but they're expensive, they're big, and they're cumbersome. They also sell these bags you can put your cameras in. I can't remember the name of the brand, but they're heavy-duty bags that zip up, and you put your camera in there, and they're good to 10 feet of water. Well, you know, you've got, say, a $4,000 or $5,000 camera and lens in there. Putting that equipment in a $100 bag, no. You know, maybe when it's brand new, it's going to work, but after a couple of uses, I'm thinking, I'm a little worried. So, and you know, it's fun taking pictures under these conditions, right? So what do you do? Now, this thing is so small, I probably lost it. Oh. Whoa, I found it. Check it out. It's a Sony RX0. It has the same sensor in it as the Sony RX100, which is a terrific small, I call it point and shoot, but it's more than a point and shoot. It does RAW, it does high speed stuff. It's a great camera. So this is totally waterproof. And it's so small, it's one of the things that you go on a trip somewhere, you're not going to, you know, you're not going to say, "Oh, this is too big, I'm going to leave it behind." You're going to take this with you. Some of the other manufacturers also make some, you know, waterproof point and shoot cameras. But this one's pretty handy and it produces good files and you can do videos. It's sort of like a GoPro-ish looking camera, but it's got the Sony sensor technology and the Sony processing, so the files look pretty good. And you could do these kind of pictures and it's great. Even when you're shooting things like waterfalls, let me look at this from, you're trying to get the rainbow, and here I was waiting, I saw the rainbow, waiting for oops. So I waited for the light to change. See the shadows? So you're not just standing there grabbing one frame, saying, "Okay, I'm standing there with the camera getting soaked, waiting and waiting because I want the best image. I want the best frame from this stuff." So you're waiting, and then you get the good frame. So even a waterfall, the wind starts blowing the wrong way, or whatever way it wants to blow, and your camera's going to get wet. Fog and smoke. When you're shooting in these kind of conditions, one of the things you have to watch out for is your exposure. And we'll get into that in a minute. Let's see what... All right, this is in the Okefenokee, and it looks a bit foggier on the real screen. This is a little sharper than it is. But this isn't real fog. Where's the gentleman back there? There you go. The condensation, the reverse of the cold weather. So you're sleeping in your nice air-conditioned hotel room, and this happened to me in Cuba a lot, and you head out, and it's 98% humidity, 95 degrees, and what happens? Your cameras are freezing cold. You go outside, wham, it's the opposite of what happens in the cold weather when, well, you can't bring a plastic bag out. And you're sitting there trying to wipe off the condensation, all remember wiping off the condensation on your lens. So this was actually condensation on my lens, and I said, oh, hey, it looks like it's foggy and misty here. I'll make use of it. But the only way I found, so when I was in Cuba in this over-air-conditioned hotel room, was at night, I would take my camera bag, wrap it in a couple of blankets, and stick it in the closet on the floor. So the next morning when I went out, the camera wasn't cold, because first time I did it, I walk out, and I'm ready to shoot, and the camera's sweating, water, condensation. There's nothing I could do. And there are moments, images, pictures going on in front of me that I'm not getting. That doesn't make me happy. This is in Bhutan, and so when you're shooting in the fog, your camera, or in the smoke, your camera is going to read all this bright white smoke and want to make it gray, because we'll get into this privately if anyone has any questions, but the camera's exposure meter is set to be a neutral tone, which is sort of an 18% gray. So be careful of your exposures here. You may have to go a little plus or overexposure exposure system. But fog is great to shoot in. Fog and smoke produces great images. Even cooking kebabs in China. Now, I've shot some fire stuff, and here in this fire, you can see there's all sorts of particle debris coming into the picture, and you've got to be careful about getting stuff on your lens. I just put this in because I like this picture. And it looks extreme, right? I had to wear ear stuff because this explosion was pretty significant. Okay, dust. Dust is real bad stuff for you because it gets on your sensor, and then you've got to spend hours in post-production trying to clean the dust off. So what do we do about dust? Well, one of the best things to do is hopefully, if you have a camera that's a professional camera, they're pretty weather sealed. The weather sealing is on here and on the ring of the lens. And not only is it weather sealed, but it does prevent moisture from coming in. So one of the differences when you're buying a camera is the manufacturers, the lower end cameras are usually less weather sealed. The higher end cameras are more. So, if you work in extreme conditions, I think it's worth it for you to spend a little more money and get, weather sealed camera. And an interesting thing, so on your camera's shoe, there's always this little cover, and usually I take it off if I put a flash or a remote trigger on, and then I lose it. Don't lose this thing because water could get in through. All these shoes are now so sophisticated that if it's raining, water could get in. So don't lose the little slide that covers your shoe. Put it back in. I don't want to lose it. So keep that covered. And the other thing about dust is zoom lenses. I love prime lenses, but if you're working in environments where it's dusty, it's raining, you don't want to be changing lenses. That's when stuff gets on your sensor. Most of the cameras have a sensor, on the menu have a sensor cleaning thing. And then also I have, everyone's got one of these, I hope. So you always turn off the camera when you change lenses, because if the camera's on, your sensor's charged. And when it's charged, it wants to attract dust. And when you blow it, so you turn it off, you change lenses. I usually try to change lenses like this, with the camera down, because if you're going like this, right, simple, logical. And then the other thing is, having one of these things to blow the dust out, because dust is, and as much as I do, I still get a lot of dust on the camera. Working in these kind of conditions, in the desert, just the camels kicking up this kind of dust, and I'm in pretty close with a wide lens, so I'm trying to be very careful. And then in this case, I used the sand to my advantage. I saw this guy sitting there waiting, running sand through his hands. Then you hit a sandstorm, and that's really, on a sandstorm, I'll put one of the rain covers over my camera to prevent, dust from getting in. And also, I wear contact lenses. Doesn't work really good. I have to switch to glasses when I'm working in these kind of conditions. Now, there's one other condition that I work in, which I don't think you'll end up in. However, I do a lot of archaeology photography for the magazine. So I end up sitting in graves a lot, which are pretty dirty and pretty dusty. And I'll get the camera down low, which is great, these pop-up screens, right? You get like this and you get it right on the ground without you having to get so into it. Working with your cameras on a camel. Speaking of which, when you are working in these kind of conditions, look at what the locals are wearing. There's a reason they know how to dress for their climate. So I bought one of these Berber head scarves and learned how to tie it. And it really makes a difference in sucking in smoke and dust, and especially keeps the top of my head protected. So there's a little, in this case, the dust worked great for the picture. It made this photo of this Cuban baseball game give it a little ballet drama look. And this is where I plug the book. So my book just came out. If anyone's into Cuba, the culture of Cuba, baseball, travel,